I am going to now talk about more advanced vibe coding. So that was like pretty much install Gemini. I don't do any configurations, and I'm just going to go and roll with it. That's what most people do, and that's usually the people who don't have as great of an experience because it does stuff that you did not want it to do, or you're like, I wanted it to do something in particular, and it did not. So I wanted to show everybody what it could do if you make no configurations, which is usually like 50 to 75% of the people. But just like everything, right? Until you understand how to use the tool, you're not going to get the most out of it. And so I am going to go in for this part of the session. I'm going to go in and talk about the different configurations that you can do, tips and tricks of things that we like to use ourselves that make our experience so much better. And then I'm going to hand it off to Aron, who is going to go in and do some vibe coding more around security, and since this is a security summit. And so the biggest thing, I'm sure you've heard about it, context. Context actually exists in a web-based agent as well, but it is not as explicit. So whenever you have to go in and upload your PDFs of this is my persona, this is what I want it to do, that is context. And context is just a collection of information that the AI agent needs to understand. And what I always like to say, I've been calling it my personal assistant this whole time, right? So let's say that you got a new personal assistant. Aron's going to be my new personal assistant. And if I told you that I'm going to be late to my next meeting, can you let my boss know? Is Aron going to know who my boss is? He just got hired as my personal assistant. Is he going to know who my boss is? Is he going to know what meeting I'm talking about? Is he going to know any of that information? He's not, because he has no context of what I'm talking about. And same thing with these tools. We talk about how LLMs get trained. We were training this LLM with data. But honestly, you need to go and train your personal assistant to be able to understand what you're expecting. What are your rules, right? Every time we code, we have rules that we like to follow ourselves. We're going to name our methods in a certain way, whether that's camel case, whether that's title case. I want things to be done a certain way. I like my comments to be written a certain way, right? So our personal assistant is going to learn over time the things that we like. The things that we like, and soon, Aron's going to know what type of coffee I want, how much cream and sugar that I want, right? We're going to learn that over time, and that's the same thing with these tools. When we first pull it out, it's not going to really know much. We're going to have to give it time to learn what is our personality and our persona to be able to do things the way we want it to do it. So in order to give context, most of the time in a web-based one, we're going to be uploading these files. That can get annoying really fast because every single time I gotta go and upload this. But the nice thing, because this is a terminal tool and it's on our system, we can have context files. And these context files can have, it's not just one file that you can have many different files. And I will show you how, depending on the situation, how you would want it. But we'll give it general instructions. For example, I want you to use, and I'll show you, pip3 instead of pip, because my system has Python 3, and that's what I have. I want to give project-specific instructions. In this project, I am using npm run build to build my project. You could define your persona. Are you an engineer? Are you a marketing person? Are you a data analyst? Are you an HR person? Give that persona, give it the tone. I want you to be writing my text in this type of form. I'm a funny person. I want to go and write my text all witty or have jokes in them, right? We want it to sound like you. And you can actually give your examples of stuff that you have written to give that persona so that the agent can learn how you write your text so that it can generate it to be looking more like you. Define best practices. Do you want, like I said, your methods to be written in camel case? Do you want many files? Do you want it to be all written in one file? However you want. And the coding style guidelines. So if you have Python code, what are the rules? What are the guidelines? A lot of times when you work for especially a larger company, you're going to have to follow certain guidelines. So, as I mentioned, the context file can have more than one. And what I want to say is, we call it Gemini.markdown. You can actually configure it to be called anything else. I know for folks who have used like something like Cloud Code, it's called agents.markdown. You can use the same type of file, you just need to go and configure, but by default, it's going to be looking for Gemini.markdown. And so it has different loading orders. It's going to go in and do your global context file, which you can find in your .gemini folder. And these are typically default instructions that you want to follow for every single project that you have. Then wherever you're opening Gemini from, that is the current folder, and you can have a context file there. For my particular project, these are the rules that I want. So let's say you have 4 different projects and all 4 of them have different rules. You can have specific ones for that project. And then within that project, you can have subdirectories. Let's just say you have a test folder within your actual project. And for my tests, I want these rules to be followed. And so it loads it in this order, and just like most things on your computer, the last one wins. So if you have anything that's conflicting, let's say that in number 1 you say, I want to use web to search all my GitHub issues, and in number 3 you say, I want to use the GH because I have the GitHub CLI installed, the number 3 is going to win in those situations. So that's usually a common question that people have. What if I have conflicting information? It does have it in a certain order. So, oh, sorry, what did you?
How often does it refresh the context?
So by default, when you launch it, it is going to go and read all of it. We do have a command within Gemini CLI to be able to manually refresh it, but obviously as things are going, so it's creating stuff and whatever is happening on your instance of Gemini CLI, it's obviously reading it and getting that context as it's going along. But if you were to say, oh, I want to go in and modify this Gemini.markdown, it's not going to know that you modified it, and you will have to go in and manually run it, the CLI, or you can exit and come back into it. But we do not want to do a constant one. Obviously, it's going to create a lot of performance issues as well as eat up your CPU.
And attached to that question, let's suppose that you need to interrupt a session and go do something else, go to a meeting, maybe pass this work on to somebody else on their machine. How can you store kind of the current state of your project in context as well?
So you can always store your state, whether if you are using Git or any of the any source control, you can obviously store it that way. You can save your conversation. So let's say like your company always says, oh, you know how it pops up, you must restart now. And you're like, I'm in the middle of a session. You can actually save your chat history so that you can launch it back up, and it's going to have all of that context. You can also use checkpointing, which you're going to cover in a little bit, of being able to store the state of your system at that point. So let's go and take a look at some examples. Is this good? Sometimes it's hard to know how it looks like from their perspective. So this is my own personal global. This is like the number 1, the global one. I don't have too much in here. I probably can add a lot more, but this is what I have. So I have the GitHub CLI installed on there. So all of the GitHub stuff, I'm not talking about like regular commits and everything. I'm talking about like when I want to go look up GitHub issues, look up stuff about the repo. I wanted to use the GH CLI tool because I have that all configured on my system. Because like I mentioned earlier, I have Python 3. I want it to use pip 3 instead of pip. So one thing that I will say is it will go and use pip. It will say, oh, I can't use it. It's not found. And then it'll go and be smart enough to switch over to pip 3. Well, if you really think about it, everything that happens, it's tokens. Right? So if you have a limited amount of tokens, you don't want to waste it on stuff that you know is not going to work in the first place. So if you just tell it that this is my environment and this is what I find very useful in this particular file, is things that you know about your environment, things that you will do, like will you as a developer go in and use pip when you know that it is not going to work on your system? These are things that are good to go and put onto this one. And because on ours, we have Google managed environments, they don't let us do pip on global. And so we have to use virtual environments, so that's why I have the line over here that says always use virtual environments. And although there is no plan mode in Gemini CLI, nothing stops you from telling it to make a plan. And I could have gone to the point of saying, please I need to go and approve the plan before you go in and do implementation. I could have told it that, but I usually do not care that much. And so you can tell it whatever you want. So if I want all of it to create a plan first, which I actually highly recommend, because it's just like when we develop something, we don't want to just go do everything on the fly. It's good to go in and create a plan before you do something, right? So I highly recommend always asking it to create a plan. Now I have inside of a project folder, this is examples of things that you would use. So I've taken random ones that I think are very good to show. So you can have general instructions telling it the type of following coding styles. Let's just say you want 2 spaces for indentation instead of 4. So you are telling it the type of things that you would follow yourself, things that you know in your head. You're writing it all down on how you would do something. Creating your persona, the persona for the agent, talking about the different tones that you would expect this agent to have. And then a general workflow, so a workflow of how you expect it to do. So this one kind of pretty much says, before adding any of the imports, look through everything in this project and see what imports it's doing before you go and add something else. And this is like a standard workflow as saying that this is a mandatory first step. Before writing any code, you must perform an analysis to ensure comprehensive understanding of the code base. So I think the big thing about all of this is don't think that the agent knows everything. You need to go in and tell it what you want it to do. If you were to have an intern that you are starting them on a project, what would you tell them? These are the types of things that you would put in on this. And I always say context is key. It will really make a difference between good code that it produces, or I wouldn't even say bad code, but like more iterations of needing to go back and forth with the agent in order to get what you want out of it. One of a demo that I have done is we created a design doc first, which is very common. I'll get to you in a second. And then we had it and said, read this design doc and go in and implement it. And the results of that was so much better because we told all of the things that we were expecting it to do. And creating a design doc is very common in programming. I had a question over here. I do not have this on a GitHub repo, but I can definitely go and add this to the GitHub repo. This is just a mismatch of, and just to be clear, this is a mismatch of things that I found that are good out of a lot of the different projects that I've seen. And then lastly, one that you can actually see right now, if you go to where the Gemini GitHub, this is Gemini CLI's GitHub Gemini Markdown. And so if you see the first thing that it does, it says, before submitting any changes, you must run this. So if you use this, or if you try to modify anything in Gemini CLI's GitHub or the repo, it will always run it because this is the instructions. And I think that they have a lot of stuff of just telling you how they want the test to be written. And this is totally accessible. If you go to the GitHub for Gemini CLI in the Gemini.markdown, you can see all of this. And it is very thorough about what it's expecting, how to mock the different tests, and general guidance. So it always tells you to examine the test first. And it even goes in and telling why what type that it wants. So for JavaScript and TypeScript, which Gemini CLI uses, is preferring plain objects over classes. So one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that you need to actually talk to your agent or your assistant kind of like a toddler sometimes. So if you notice, this is explaining, here's why plain objects are preferred. So just like you would say to a kid, like, hey, don't run in the house because you are going to hit this corner of the table, you need to tell it why. Because the kid's not going to understand why you're telling it, right? You'll be like, well, because it's sharp, it's this. So if you give it those explanations, then it's going to understand why you don't want it to do it like that. And so it's really a mindset shift that you have to have, and you have to start thinking about it as a person, as a new person that you are training up and explaining. So that is my quick spiel over Gemini.Markdown. I cannot stress enough how important it is and how it's going to make a big difference on what gets outputted. All right, so moving on to extending Gemini CLI. So Gemini CLI, I always say, like all agents, not specifically us, I consider them a general contractor. So they know a lot about a lot of stuff. But when I am getting work done on my house and I have a plumbing issue, I'm not necessarily going to go and call a general contractor. I'm going to go call a plumber. If I have issues with my electrical, I'm going to go and hire an electrician. If I have issues, I don't know, with my landscape, I'm not going to hire a general contractor to do that. I'm going to go and hire a landscape person. So everybody has their specialty. And so this is the concept of MCP servers, Model Context Protocol. It is a standard amongst all of the different agents, AI agents. So whether that's it was standardized by Anthropic. And so MCP servers is just a standard of how AI agents can connect to anything in the outside world. What can it connect to? It can connect to either a local database, a remote database. If a product has REST APIs or any sort of APIs, it can become an MCP server. You can connect it to scripts. You can connect it to almost everything. And nowadays, a lot of companies have official MCP servers out there for you to use. And so Google Cloud has a ton of them, whether for Cloud Run, for a lot of their databases. GitHub has their MCP server. And then Sneak's going to show you their MCP server in the following session. But one thing that Gemini CLI does have is this called Gemini CLI extensions. Gemini CLI extensions, we call it MCP++. It is, most of them, you don't have to, it's not a standard that you have to, but most of them is grouping MCP servers together. And the benefit of this is packaging MCP servers with custom commands and context. So you know how we had done a Gemini.Markdown? You can have a Gemini.Markdown within your extension to explain how this MCP server should be used. So for example, let's just say for a GitHub MCP, for issues, if you ever have anything with dealing with issues, use this particular tool in my MCP server. So it's giving it more context to be able to go and do it. So this is only a small list of extensions that official companies and our partners have built. And so Gemini extensions can be installed with one single CLI command versus going in and doing all of your settings.json. And so let's go and take a look. We are going to go in onto Gemini. And so I have a brand new Gemini instance, and I am going to show you what an MCP server, let me go and make this a lot bigger again, what it can do. So let's just say I had talked about how I generated images using Nano Banana. So let me say I don't have it installed right now, so I can actually easily see what MCP servers I have. I do have a Canva one installed, but not Nano Banana. And so if I say, generate me an image of the Golden Gate Bridge. What you will notice is that although Gemini 2.5 Pro is great, it does not have, let me go in and it's wanting to use my Canva one, so let me go in and uninstall that. And so as you see, this was not intentional, but now I'm showing you how you can easily uninstall an MCP server just by one line of code. And let me go back in and go and ask it to generate a Golden Gate Bridge. And the reason why it went in and used Canva is because Canva does have image creating capabilities. And so see, with just basic, nothing installed, I am not able to generate an image because Gemini 2.5 Pro itself does not have it. So going back and here in the specs, one thing I forgot to mention is that we do have a whole bunch of extensions available, so 108 right now. Some of them are official from companies, some of them are built in the community, so there are a lot of them that you can use. And so with this, this is the Nano Banana Gemini extension. I'm sure a lot of you have played with it. So you see this one line over here, and if I paste it in straight here, it is going to do all the install for me. So it is, people used to say, oh, it's such a pain to go in and install MCP servers because you got to go in and JSON, your settings.json. And so I say, yes, I am going to install it. And there you go. It's just that simple. So now if I go in and ask for the same prompt, because Nano Banana specializes in creating images, it asks me, do I want to use this MCP server? Yes, I do. And it is going to go in and generate me this photo. And one thing you want to notice is that in this prompt, notice how it says a photorealistic image of the Golden Gate Bridge, and it probably says many more things. And that is not the actual prompt that I gave it. And the reason why it does that is that this is an extension, so it wrapped extra context to my request so that it can actually give me better results. So here it says that this is where the file is. I am going to go into shell mode and say to open. Oops. That is because I did not do the right path. There you go. And now it opened up my photo. So this is what Nano Banana produced for me. So as you see, I was not able to use it with basic Gemini CLI, just the basic model. And then after adding an MCP server, because that Nano Banana specializes in images, it was able to now produce it. So extending the tool to be able to do what you actually want it to do. And now let's take a look at, I had said that you can do install that. And then with extensions, here is the Nano Banana one, and you can have custom commands. Custom commands are a way to wrap prompts that you are using over and over. So a lot of the times, if you create a prompt and it says like, I want this and I want this, and it's super long. So here, as you see, this prompt, I could technically go and add it all into the prompt itself. But if you use this over and over, then it'll get a little bit annoying because you're probably going to be like, oh, let me go and open, and as you see, I have a little thing that says prompts over here. You probably, I'm sure a lot of people who use AI have these little files that says prompts. And so you just go in and you copy it over. But if you go and create these become very simple, easy to use ones. So this is called Nano Banana. And so if I were to go in over here, oops, I am still in show mode, and I can go into the Nano Banana prompt over here and be able to use that. And what it's going to do is utilize that prompt, that large prompt. Rather than pasting it all over here, I can just go in and do some custom command. And this is very useful to share. So let's just say Aron wants to do the exact same thing. Rather than me going in and pasting it and say, hey, this is a big prompt that you need to go and paste in. Let me share it with you. If I just created a custom command within an extension, and an extension can just be a custom command. You don't have to actually have MCP servers or anything with it. It's like a pick and choose what's in your package. Then I can share it with Aron, and Aron can just do a one-line install and then be able to do the exact same stuff. So it's great for collaborating within your teams. It's great for things that you just repetitively use over and over. Just sort of like when you're an engineer and you're just like, oh, I'm doing the exact same thing. I probably should write a script for this. That's kind of similar.
Can you ask, for instance, like the Nano Banana, can you have this instead of an extension itself so you can like kind of like cascade them?
If it does not require an extension is basically, you can put whatever you want. So let's just say they're just all prompts, right? Nothing to do with external tooling. Yes, you can have a custom command to do that. So let's just say that because it has access to all my files or my tools, let's just say that the prompt is using my GitHub CLI, something that's already installed on my system. You can just create a custom command that just says, always use this, and this is what I want to be outputted to this particular one. So it's just stuff that you are using frequently. It's almost like your shortcuts is kind of what we call it, like a shortcuts to your prompts.
And Denise, insofar as, you showed that there's an ability to select specific tools. But some of these different MCP-based tools, they kind of have overlapping use cases. And so is there a way in Gemini.md to say, for SEA and code analysis, use Sneak. For generating this type of image, use Canva?
So you can, if you know already that, just like that whole, I had Canva installed and then had Nano Banana, if you know for sure that you want to use one in particular and you have multiple ones that do the exact same thing, you can put it in your Gemini Markdown and say, for this particular, for all image creation, please use the Nano Banana one. Or when it does pop up, you can always click escape and you can say, I want you to use the Nano Banana MCP server. So you can say that. It tries to do what it thinks is the best, but if you have something in particular that you want, then you can definitely go in and tell it exactly what you want. And you don't need to necessarily put it in your Gemini Markdown. You can always just in the prompt say, no, I want this else. Question?
How is the permission and context passed?
On what?
On any extension or MCP?
So as you see, when I launched the Nano Banana one, it actually asked me whether or not I want to be able to use it. Are you talking about like permissions to be able to like modify your files? You can define that within the extensions or MCP of whether you do want it to prompt it or not. That's the beauty of like that whole giving it context. So if you put it in the context that says it'll always ask for permission. But whenever an MCP server does get chosen to be used, you have to give it permission to actually go and use.
Yes, that's the permission of I approve you to use this. But the question then is, maybe I didn't ask the question wrong, the identity, which is what does that run as? And am I passing yet another freaking API key across the wire and on and on and on? And how do I track payment of the US? I mean, there's these cascading effects of choosing extensions and MCPs to do work for you, which surfaced in yesterday's conversation. And everyone says, this is a real problem, we need to solve it, right?
So it really depends on the MCP server itself, right? So yes, some of them, it depends on how it was done, but so a lot of them, like even my Nano Banana one, I need to give it an API key because obviously my account, I can generate as many images as I want. And so I do have API key, but the Nano Banana one, my API key is not being passed in there. It's on my local system. So I have it in my env file. And so it does that check in the beginning, but I cannot say for every MCP server, right? Because it really depends on how they coded it, of what their expectation. Are they passing it through? I'm not sure, and that's why I always tell people that obviously you would trust the official ones, right? Because they tend to have more security around that. Be careful about using random MCP servers that you do not know who built them because we don't know.
Being at a security summit, to be honest with you, I think the velocity that is being driven by the major vendors is actually one of the biggest concerns in trust right now, which is you shouldn't trust major vendors delivering because they're delivering every week and you cannot trust that velocity.
That's a fair statement, and I think that's just going to have to ultimately be our own comforts. Like even I myself, admittedly, when AI and ChatGPT stuff came out, I was all like, I'm not giving any of my data. I'm not doing any of this stuff. Like that was my honest truth of like how it was for me, and so it just becomes like what you will feel comfortable with. Okay, so, but yes, that's excellent, and I totally get that perspective because that was me with just AI in general before, and I had lots of skepticism of like, are you taking all my data? What are you doing with it? And I think a big thing for me, and I think for me, And of course, read all the terms and conditions. But most of the paid tiered stuff and a lot of the paid AI tools does stipulate that we are not training on your data. And so just make sure you do read a lot of these terms and conditions. Next, I would like to talk about, we have shell mode all in here, and you probably saw me doing it. If you put an exclamation point, now you can see over here that now I'm in shell mode. And in this folder, I can say ls, so I'm gonna see. And I have a little Mad Libs, I don't know why I spelled it that way, but I have a Mad Libs little script here, and it's actually expecting some input. And normally in lots of these tools, you cannot do it, and I don't believe that you can do it in Cloud Code unless they added it within the time that we've added this feature. But what you notice here is that it could do Control F to go in and go into this focus. So now that I'm in focus, I can actually go and interact with my shell. So I'm gonna go and say an adjective, let's just say purple. A noun, what noun should I do, Aaron?
Let's see. Microphone.
Microphone. Microphone. Let's do another adjective.
Loud.
I think this is the last one. One more noun.
Cell phone.
What?
Cell phone.
Okay. Cell phone. So as you notice, I can go in as if I were doing this on my terminal window. And it went in and created my story. But what's nice is all of this context is now context for the agent. So here, if I go out of shell mode, so I'm back to regular mode, and I can say, tell me the story that got generated. And I mean, this is kind of a silly example. Nobody's really gonna be doing it like this, but obviously there's other use cases for when this is very good. But as you see, the agent knows about the story. I can ask it, what were the adjectives? Adjectives that I gave. And so it can go in and go, because it's in the context, it's going to know the different adjectives that it gave. So yes, this one's a silly example, but let's just say if you are some person that needs to go into the console of a server and do these configurations and know whether it's up or down, ask the agent, how do I fix this problem? Any of that stuff. I do not remember how I need to configure my network and server. I don't remember all the configurations. A network engineer probably can do it with their eyes closed, but I can't. And so what's nice is that it can generate the actual command for me, and I don't have to actually remember that. And I think I'm almost done, but the last thing I want to say is that this is a terminal instance. I can go in and do Gemini again, and again, and over in different folders, same folder, whatever I want, which means that I can run these in parallel. And I can go in, let's just say in the morning, and I have several tasks. Can you go in and look at the GitHub issues, what came in overnight? Can I go in and fix this GitHub issue? Can I go in and do some market research? So you can launch as many instances as you want and be able to do things in parallel. While all of that stuff is going, you can do whatever you want, whether that's going and getting your coffee, whether that's taking your meetings, anything of that nature. So that means that you can be more efficient. I always say it's not taking over your job. It's just giving you more time to do the things that you want to do. So I am going to hand it off over to Aron to go and, I think, do some vibe coding.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Denise. All right, I'm just going to get set up over here. So I'm going to start working on my context. In this particular example, I really want to focus on a workflow that uses test-driven development. And I'll do maybe a simplified version of that. But really, there are 3 steps to everything that I create. The first is a red phase, where I write the test. It's red because the test has to fail. And this should make sense intuitively, because if it's passing, that test doesn't mean anything. If it's a feature that doesn't exist yet, the test should fail. The next phase is the green phase, and this is the minimal implementation, right? This is just what it takes to get the test passing. And why am I doing this small iterative change? Because one of the biggest problems with vibe coding is that it does way too much at once, as I mentioned earlier. So by just having it pass the test, I'm constraining it to just focus on one little bit of functionality. And then finally, there's the refactor phase, which is where I, split things up, maybe avoid duplication, anything that I need to. If there's unnecessary libraries that got introduced, I can rip those out. If I want to extend the functionality, I could do it there. If the refactor looks like it's going to be too big, then I just create a new test and start this whole process over. Before I get started with this, though, I'm just kind of curious from the audience, how many of you have used test-driven development before at work? Okay, cool, so about half. And how many of you had a somewhat unpleasant experience with it at some point? I'm just kind of curious. Okay, cool, right. So I had kind of buried memories of using it for a long time. My biggest issue with it was typically the fact that we were writing a lot of unit tests and there wasn't complete code coverage. So those two things combined led to a situation where we kind of questioned a lot of the time whether the testing was truly necessary. And it started to feel like overhead and grunge work, right? There were also cases where you can't really trust the output of the tests. There are cases where developers have to ship quickly, so they're just kind of commenting out tests. We've seen it all. So the benefit of being able to generate things very quickly, though, and especially have your assistant do some of the work that you don't love doing, is that there's now kind of an easier path to writing tests. So in these examples, I will be doing unit tests in some cases. That's just for the sake of the example today. But if we look at like what Denise tried to build earlier, and some of those functional situations she was running into, like only having login at checkout, those types of things could be turned into a test. Denise also mentioned using product documentation as kind of a guide, or design documents as a guide to the test. This is an excellent flow. So I Google the teams that I see using this approach are actually using a product requirement doc to write the tests and just building around those user journeys. And then, so we also mentioned being able to take those small iterative steps and to step back if we need to. I'm just trying to see where, okay, yeah. So I'm using restore to do that. So instead of writing git commits in this particular example, I'm just offering the ability to step back to a previous state. One of the horror stories that you see with vibe coding, especially in Reddit, especially with people who have never done software development before, is I lost months of work. It blew everything away. And if you're doing any sort of version control, that shouldn't be happening. So just to add those guardrails, because we're all susceptible to forgetting that, I'm just having it so that every single iteration it has kind of a checkpoint to go back to. I think of vibe coding like in a video game. You suddenly decide to go to the highest difficulty and then face the final boss with all this equipment you just got. You certainly want to be saving as you go because there's a good chance you're going to run into a problem. Whereas the original vibe coding, where people were just kind of jumping into it, was very high risk. They kind of risked losing their projects all the time. And then finally, just this morning I was telling Denise, I kept running into this annoying thing where it kept wanting to use pip instead of pip3, and she gave me the advice to just add this. So you're expected to constantly keep updating this as the project demands. So just to do a really, really basic example, I will create let's see, I am presenting to a live audience. Please write a function that greets everyone following your mandate. TDD. Okay. Moment of truth. All right, so the first thing it's going to do is create a directory. Yes, we can allow that. All right, And now, by the way, this is in VS Code. Someone had asked about that earlier. So I'm able to see kind of in the environment that I'm used to working in, what it's planning to introduce. So first, it's writing the test, right? No code. And, okay, hello world, that's great. Okay. So we will accept that. It also shows everything here, but I just like seeing it in VS Code. Okay. Yes, so now following my instructions, it's going to run the test first to make sure that it's failing, right? First thing we want to do is make sure the test is not green, because otherwise it's redundant, it's not really showing us anything.
And then, I mean, I've noticed this says, this is our red state. So this is what he had defined in the Gemini.markdown, right? So it's definitely making sure to follow what you had defined earlier, that is the phase that it's currently in.
Right. All right. And it ran the test, and there's no module called greeter. Good. I haven't created it yet. So the test failed as expected. Now it's going to write just the amount of code required to make the test pass. This is the green step. Okay. All right. So it's implemented this function, and I'm going to run the test again. Fingers crossed.
You gotta pray to the demo gods.
Yes, okay, and the test passed, so we have a green light. So the final step is refactor. This was such a small example, there's probably not a whole lot to refactor. But just to give a sense of what I do, I'll also look for any errors that came up, any warnings, and see if we can get rid of those. But now let's say, okay, it's passing world. Let's say that I want it to say world by default and to optionally take someone else's name. I want the function to say world by default, and test for taking someone's name, like Denise. Okay. So it's adding a new test case for me. It's looking at the current test and seeing what needs to be modified. All right. Oh, for faster responses. Okay, thank you.
So I guess one thing is that, especially in the last 2 weeks, I think maybe it was put in, Gemini, our model has made it where it will detect what is the right model to be using, because obviously different models are specialized in different things. And so if it detects that it should be using the Flash versus the Pro, it's going to go and switch over to that. And the benefit of that is pretty much from a token and token perspective. Pro is going to take more tokens, and why use Pro when you can do it cheaper for Flash? And so it does have that auto switch for you.
Cool. So it's created this new test that's going to test a person's name, but I'd also asked it to be world by default. So this test, would not be covering that functionality. So I'm going to actually ask it to improve a little bit. The new test is good, but change the old one to test world by default if there is no input instead of passing world. So we've removed it from passing world here. Okay, I like that. And now we're also adding Denise. Cool. So now we have both the tests that I want. Okay. And this should, again, fail because with this new test, if we're not passing anything, I didn't include that functionality yet, so it should fail. Okay. Oops, wow. There we go. Okay. Good, I failed. Okay. Right. And so now it's going to change the function to take world by default. Very cool. And now we're going to see the test again. And it should pass both tests now. Okay, all tests passed. So that's just a super minimal example. I have a GitHub repo with this, by the way, if you want to kind of follow along. Let's see if I can get you. I'm going to start doing some start fixing some security issues next. So maybe I'll give you the QR code for this. It contains the same markdown, though, that I'm using. So that's why it may be useful for you if you want to follow along. So let's create a QR code. And if you want to snap this with your phone, I'll leave it up for just a few seconds. Take any questions before we jump into fixing some basic security issues. Yes?
The Gemini.md file,
Uh-huh.
is it going to supersede my being served or cursor rule set?
No, it won't, because it is, we are getting your Gemini.md based off of what your projects are. So unless you call them the same and you can use them on both, you would need to make a separate configure your settings that way, which is perfectly okay, but it does not supersede anything else that's happening on your windsurf or anything, because we're independent of it. But you can use the exact same file and just say,
I have something similar for any model that I use. Make it generic, not specific.
so you just need to go in and make that configuration change into your settings.json, and we have that in the documentation on how to do it. Default, it just checks for all Gemini.markdown, but if you just go into the documentation, you'll be able to use the same ones that you are using for other tools.
Have you seen anything different from other models for any special instructions?
Not really. I mean, it's essentially, we tried our best to make it as same as possible because we know people use multiple tools, and we try to be as standard as possible. So I think that that's a common goal between everybody, but obviously we're all different companies, but we're trying to make it as frictionless as possible.
Does Claude also have something?
Does Claude have something similar? Yes, they do.
I never tried.
They don't have a free tier though, so that's our advantage.
Yes. Great. So now I've got a few examples. Andrew, in the session right after this, is going to go into how to use Sneak to detect some of these issues, using Sneak in particular. But just to give an example, if you're able to see a vulnerability just reading your own code, you can start to take some actions right away. So I've picked a few different types because I had no idea what background the audience had. I've got a front-end issue, command injection with Python, and insecure configuration for a GCS bucket. But let's start with the cross-site scripting. So in this particular case, I don't know who in here knows Vue.js. React is very similar, but if anyone can tell me what they see is wrong with this, please feel free to raise your hand. Maybe let you look at it. And I'll give a hint. All of these have to do with user input. Okay, I don't see any hands. So issue here is that this is using Vue, and this directive in Vue, v-html, takes actual HTML. And so I could put in script tags here, and it would execute it as JavaScript. And so the problem is I'm taking this untrusted user input, and instead of treating it as data, like as a string, I'm treating it as code and executing it. So, just out of curiosity, I mean, I actually don't know if it will detect it, but I could just ask, do you see any issues with index.html in the...
So as you're typing that, I mean, obviously somebody from a security perspective can see that right away. But if you're thinking about how I think a lot of the issues is like as a developer would go in and build this code, they don't see these things because they're not trained to be able to find these issues. And so this is a good way for people who are not knowledgeable of these types of things to be able to find these issues without needing to know in depth.
Yeah.
Is it going to be as good as somebody who's a trained professional? No, but at least we're able to reduce the number of security issues.
Right. But Gemini did a pretty good job in this point. So it called out exactly what the issue is with VHTML. So now I'm going to say, okay, I want users to be able to input strings, but have them treated just as that. Please use an alternative to VHTML that's safer. And so again, it's going through my flow. So it's going to do user input. So we'll try that. Okay. And I want it to run, please do a test for that.
You are very nice to your agent.
Yeah, when they take over, I want them to be nice to me, so I'll just say please. Yeah, I wonder if it will be a little bit faster if I'm mean to it. Let's see. Okay, cool. So I'm just revising my test too. Right, right.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, it's like your personal assistant. So a lot of people do use, please, can you do this? I don't know whether or not it makes a difference, but hey, it trains you to be a nicer person, right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to show, while we were having a nice conversation about agents taking over the world, it passed the test. So, just, these tests are the sanity check that was kind of missing for a lot of vibe coding use cases. Much easier to do in a CLI in your environment than, copying and pasting things and so forth. Okay, next one. I have the name of the vulnerability in these directory names, I just realized, but this is a fun one. So, yeah, this is just a function to help people find, or to list what's inside a directory. Can anyone tell me the problem with using os.system? Do I see a hand? No. Oh, hey, Randall.
I'm kind of scared of using system calls.
Okay, yeah. And again, I have this user input, right? File name. So if I'm, a good little user and I just say an actual file name, this should work. But, what happens if I say and rm minus rf, right? I can probably sneak some commands in there too. So again, I'm just kind of curious whether it can catch this. Tell me any, issues with okay.
Let's see if it's smart enough to find it.
Yeah. I did pick pretty recognizable ones. So I'm pretty sure it's in the training set.
We never know what the model's going to tell us,
Right.
so.
which is why you definitely want a security tool as well as an LLM. But just out of curiosity. Okay, no, I found it. And so, I'd even use my example. I think it's spying on me. So in that case, it's suggesting to use subprocess.run because, again, that will turn the second argument into a string no matter what, right? So it will look for an actual file with this name, which would be really weird. But it'll escape the input. That's the key point. So great. Can you update the test and check and create that change? Okay, so it's starting with the test. I'm using an emulator for a lot of this, so that's why I need to change the tests. Usually, when you're doing TDD really well for functional testing, you don't change the tests at all, right? That's the whole idea. You could change the language, the framework, everything going on underneath, and the test remains the same. And that's the sign that you're looking at functionality and not just implementation details. But in this case, just for the sake of example, I'm going to change my test. And now I will update this actual file. So we're going to replace it. Okay, wait, it's still doing the test. Good. Okay. So first we're checking that it fails. Looks good. And now we're going to I'm just trying to see. Okay. Cool. Great. Now, since I don't know too much about these other kind of ways to use OS in Python, this is where I would really want to have a security tool that is very specialized just on that to check that everything I'm fixing here that Gemini CLI says is great is actually the best option. And a way that I can do that is to start including those security checks in my tests, right? Security is part of software quality, so I should be testing for security every time I'm testing for functionality too. Okay, so test pass. And then the final one is going to be an insecure Terraform configuration. Keep hitting the touchpad, sorry about that. What's the issue with the main.tf configuration for the bucket? Other than being called my insecure bucket, right? Okay. So here I'm granting this viewer role to all users. And so there's a lot of public access on this bucket. Change that, please, to only allow access to the user Aron demo at google.com. So first it's going to rewrite the test. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. Yes, good. All right. And again, it's using this emulator. That's why there's so many changes to the test itself. Really, what you want to do is like use Terraform's validation commands to make sure the Terraform that you're writing is legit. And then if you have any policy as code, I think HashiCorp has another kind of related tool for that. But you could also run that as part of your test. Right? There's also tools like Mondu, that's often used for compliance that you could use to check that, if you have certain compliance requirements, your configuration meets those. Okay, yeah, so I'm not able to run Terraform locally, darn. Okay, but let's just see. Okay, I'm gonna break my own rule. Skip the test and show me the better Terraform. Yeah, so Denise had shown in her Gemini.md file that she's using a virtual environment. I'm running this locally, which is why I'm running into this issue, but all right. Cool, so you can see, in this case, I'm hard coding the username. I probably would save that as a variable and have it maybe even in Secret Manager, something kind of completely separate from the code, but again, you can see I'm changing it from all users to a specific one. Cool. Yeah, there we go. So that's it for some of these basic examples. So what we've shown is that you can build with Gemini, certainly. That's the first thing we showed. But also that you can include some of the quality control at every single step and make these small iterative changes that are very easy to recover from if you don't like what you've written. And then finally, once you do discover security issues, you've got a way to implement the fixes that's also lower friction, right? You're not wasting a lot of time trying to find good options. You can find a good option, implement, and then retest, right? That's really all I had to show, I think. Yeah. Again, I'll put that QR code if you want to play with some of what I showed
So
today.
I guess in the next session, you're going to learn more about how you can use the Snake MCP server and how that can be done. And then, Aron and I will be hanging out outside. I hope that you guys had a chance to play with Gemini CLI. And if you have any questions, you can come up to us, and we will be glad to help you as much as possible.